Mitch Lawrence, Forbes, Sporting News, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mitch, were you surprised to see at 4:30 in the morning that this deal was dropped?
Oh, yeah, I definitely was. I thought that the Spurs would wait until Kawhi showed up at that Team USA thing, which is, in a couple of weeks or so, and, have him go through practice so everybody could see his leg and then get other offers. But, what I found out later was that the Spurs, the number one thing they were looking for in this deal was you had to give them back in return someone who's an established scorer who can get them 20 points a night. You know how many teams got eliminated there?
Just about everybody.
The Sixers.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Sixers don't have anybody. So Lakers obviously didn't have anybody. Toronto had somebody in DeMar DeRozan. So that fulfilled their first, and that was non-negotiable from my understanding. So, and that's from talking to a person with one of those teams. So, listen, I was still very surprised that it came down. I think that considering that they had a gun put to their head by Kawhi Leonard, they did a pretty good job. I know people are talking about they should have got more young players out of Toronto. Poeltl's he'll be good. They'll get a pick, and they got DeMar DeRozan, who, you know what, he's not Kawhi Leonard, but he's a top 25 player. We know he has struggles in the playoffs. He, defensively, it's the biggest problem because, they go from Kawhi Leonard, who might be the best defender on the perimeter, one of the best defenders overall, and the best perimeter defender in the game when he's healthy, when he's invested, to a guy who Toronto basically struggled with because they had to hide him on defense. He didn't want to play defense. He wanted to be more of an offensive player. So this is a big, bold move for Toronto, obviously. We'll get to that, but for the Spurs, it's a terrible day for that organization because anytime you have a player who's a top 2 or 3 player, 4 player in the league, 27 years of age, who forces his way out, forces you to trade him, who's been a Finals MVP, that's a bad day for that franchise. And over the last 20 years, they haven't had many.
Mitch Lawrence here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. All right, 59 wins, the 1 seed with DeRozan, multiple solid finishes. You swap DeRozan out and put Kawhi Leonard in there. And Danny Green's no slouch, by the way. Is Toronto the top dog in the East?
Danny Green's fallen off a lot. But in terms of your question, you know what? I'd say Boston. And then, we'll see about how healthy Kawhi is and how invested he is in the season. If he gets injured, does he take games off? It sounds like he doesn't want to be there long term. So who knows what he's going to pull during the regular season. I'd still put Boston first. I'd probably put, if everything's right, I'd put Toronto and then Philadelphia, under them. But, hey, this is we'll see how it works out in Toronto. I don't have my hopes up for Nick Nurse here.
Obviously, Kawhi doesn't seem thrilled. Neither does DeRozan, for that matter. Is there a potential that I think DeRozan will show up and play, but is there a potential that Kawhi never wears a Toronto uniform?
That he sits out, or that I don't see that because he's going to lose a ton of money. He lost a ton of, I just don't see that. I think he'll play there and then leave. Will he walk to the Lakers? There are conflicting reports about, he wants to go to the Lakers. And then there's, he doesn't want to be the number 2 guy. So, you know what, without really hearing it from him, who knows? But I think both guys will play with their teams. They're not happy, obviously, initially. I mean, DeRozan was one of the few players, probably their best player ever, who decided to stay. They've lost Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter and Chris Bosh, and here's a guy from Los Angeles who actually wanted to play there. I really couldn't believe it. He had a chance to go to the Lakers, and you know what? Didn't go back home. So, we'll see. But this is something that Toronto had to do because obviously, if you look at their roster and their salary structure, DeMar DeRozan, for what you get in the playoffs, was not worth his money. And this is a type of deal which could help accelerate the rebuild, especially if Kawhi leaves and you'll have Lowry and Ibaka come off the books, and you'll do a reset. But the Spurs don't do resets, as you can see from this deal. That's not in them, and especially with Greg Popovich towards the end of his coaching career, he's not going to rebuild at this point, so he grabbed DeRozan. So we'll see how they do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I look at it for Toronto. They take a swing for this year, and if they make it to the finals, I think that's a success for them. If he walks, you got that 3-year DeRozan contract out, and you kind of, you pass purgatory, you go to the bottom of the pack with what's left over if Kawhi is out of that team.
Yeah, I mean, they've been around the league, 23 years. They've got 2 Eastern Conference finals. So when you talk about if they go to the finals, it's a success. Yeah, that's an unbelievable success for that franchise. And so, we'll see how it. I mean, we're all fascinated to see if Kawhi is healthy, if he's invested in playing, if he does his best. He checked out on the Spurs. He basically walked away from them. Who's to say if his leg starts acting up, it doesn't happen again in Toronto, with we all seeing that he wants to go to L.A. I mean, not a great thing to say about him, but he's brought a lot of it on himself.
Mitch, what are you hearing about Carmelo?
I tweeted out. It's gotten a lot of action on Twitter land. Found out that the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Atlanta Hawks have talked about a deal where Carmelo would go to Atlanta basically to get bought out. And then Atlanta really wants to get rid of Dennis Schroeder because they've got Trae Young now, and they want to get rid of Mike Muscala, send them to Oklahoma City. The deal, Atlanta would have to add an asset or two to make Carmelo's buyout a kind of a wash in terms of the money. So we'll see if it happens. I know there's one tweet that caught my attention on, and it's been repeated often. This is that the Thunder never leaks out stuff, so this probably won't happen. If you remember the Paul George trade, that came out of left field. A lot of stuff that Oklahoma City does and Sam Presti does is very close to the vest. So we'll see. But I know they have talked. I know Atlanta's definitely in the they can't wait to get rid of Dennis Schroeder because he's got so many off-court issues, including a pending, I think it's a felony charge over an incident, and they really want to move on from him, and they're not real thrilled with Mike Muscala, and they'd like to take Carmelo just to get the last year, of his contract off their books, and he would go to obviously Houston. So we'll see what happens. So Carmelo is definitely a guy who Oklahoma City wants to get something for.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. What do you make of this Belitza story where he pulls out of the Sixers deal? He basically says it's a family thing. He wants to stay home, and now he looks like he's going to sign with Sacramento, maybe. Oh,
well, first of all, let me just do a little opinion, a little editorializing on Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder in Oklahoma City would be a real nice addition, either coming off the bench or playing alongside Russell Westbrook. I think that would help them a lot, so we'll see what happens. In terms of Bielitsa, I didn't know he was going to Sacramento. I thought he was going to be in Europe. The word is he's been in the league with 3 years, and he still hasn't adjusted to the United States.
Huh.
That's the word out of Minnesota anyway.
Well, then Sacramento makes sense.
Well, he was supposed to replace Ersan Ilyasova,
yeah.
So Philadelphia took a step back there. Now, how is he getting to Sacramento?
Shams is reporting that he is discussing a deal, and there was a report that apparently he felt undervalued at the 1-year deal and backed out of it and is looking for more money. But that's kind of bad form, right?
Yes. Yeah, if you made an agreement, it certainly is. So we'll see what happens.
And his reasoning was his family. It was a family decision to stay in Europe and play in the Euro League.
Well, who knows? I mean, all I know is this. There are a lot of guys who go to Sacramento and they hate it. And George Hill was the last one. They're okay going there, and then once they're there and they experience it and they play for that organization, they hate it and they want out.
That's a shame.
So we'll see. I mean, you never know, but this is not, Philadelphia did not have a good summer. Couldn't get Kawhi, couldn't get Paul George, I didn't think they ever had a shot at LeBron. I think that's just part of the Rich Paul narrative that, we all thought LeBron was going to. Like Jerry West said, this is not a huge Lakers signing free agency, and I'm paraphrasing because LeBron wanted to be a Laker and he wanted to go to Los Angeles, period. Mm-hmm. Like everybody discounted Philadelphia, although Rich Paul has Ben Simmons there. Big deal for LeBron James. Yeah. But Philly's not had a good offseason, and they're still struggling to get a GM.
What do you make of the Stein report on them trying to get Morey?
Well, I've heard they want to get a big name, and that's interesting. They're, star-chasing GMs when it comes to star-chasing players, but also GMs. I will say this. From my understanding, this is talking to people around the league. This is their ownership group who are still, people people look at that, and there are some GMs who are a little worried about that ownership, not from selling or anything, just in terms of how it would be to work there for those guys. So I don't know really the reason behind that, but just that's what I heard might be a stumbling block to people, going down to Philadelphia. But you know what? You hear a lot of stuff
Sure.
So sometimes you got to take things with a grain of salt.
Well, I mean, I don't look, as much as I was on board, there has been a ton of blunders with this ownership group going back to the Bynum deal. This is before Hinkie, stuff that happened during the Hinkie regime, the way that the Hinkie thing got pushed out. He got pushed aside. They brought Colangelo. Yep. I mean, they have made a ton of poor PR decisions. Well, there's no question about that.
And, everybody, whether it's other owners, GMs, executives, that's all stuff that people take note of. Mm-hmm. What does ownership do? And not just in terms of spending money, but how do they handle themselves? How do they do deals? How do they execute things? And the blunders you talk about. That's quite what you mentioned there is quite the
oh, yeah.
You could see why people might have second thoughts or, Daryl Morey's in a great situation, but he might have looked at that too and said, you know what? I know my owner here, even though he's new, and I had a great owner in Les Alexander before, and Tillman Fertitta's great, and these other guys who are pulling this stuff in Philadelphia, I don't need to get involved in that.
That was an interesting story that came out. Sixers, by the way, yes, if you didn't hear it, they apparently called the Rockets to try to talk to Daryl Morey and kind of got rebuffed on that one. So they still are without a GM, and we'll see what happens if they end up going. I mean, because is this bizarre that they're kind of just – it seems like there's no urgency here, or do signs point that they'll keep it in-house?
Good question. I don't know. I haven't really looked at it that closely or talked to people. So we'll see. I think there is an urgency, though. You never want to be without a real full-time, you don't want to be with an acting GM too long. Mm-hmm. Brett Brown's got to devote himself to coaching the team. You don't want to have a guy in a dual position. That stuff doesn't work out unless it's Greg Popovich, and we saw what happened now with the Kawhi Leonard situation. So I would think it would be still an urgent matter for them to get
at Mitch_Lawrence. Check him out on SiriusXM NBA Radio, writing for Sporting News and Forbes on the NBA. And, boy, the NBA offseason picked up a notch with the Kawhi Leonard trade in the early hours, and he was kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you later.